Hello and welcome to today's chat for International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, where I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by my good friend, Sharissa Sebastian Deppen, who is the CEO of Leadership Mastery Alliance, which is a company specialising in supporting introverted servant leaders who are women in corporate leadership. Sharissa, I always love our chats, and I am so very grateful that you were willing to come along today and have this chat with me, because I think I know from my own personal experience of when I had imposter syndrome, almost the number one thing I would not do is have a conversation about it, because then people would know. My secret would be out, and my fraudulence would be uncovered. And yet, actually talking about it is when we realise we're not alone. And so I'm so grateful that you've come along to carry on the conversation with me and share some of your experiences.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me again. It's always such a pleasure and so much fun chatting with you, Kim. And I love this topic too. And I love that you're addressing this because, like you said, there's just so many people. I think you mentioned like 70%, right, of people that experience this at some point. So I love that you're and then we're talking about this and bringing light to it, because there's just so much to unpack. So
it is, and I always love our chats. We always get really stuck in straight away, don't we? But I think what I love about them is actually all we're doing really is sharing lived experience and being able to not only our own, but people we've worked with and some of the clients that you're helping. Because I think often we want to put things in we love a label, don't we? We want to give everything a label and stick it in a category so that we can understand it and lock it away. And yet the reality is what we really want to be able to do is talk about it, bring it to life, and demonstrate that actually that lots of people will feel like this at some point. People that you wouldn't expect to. One of the ones that always stands out for me is Einstein. So he had a quote in which he said something like, "The high esteem within which my works are held leave me feeling like an unlikely swindler." So somebody who recognizes a global genius doubts themselves, and so many famous people from Oprah to Eminem, people that you wouldn't expect. And I guess that was really kind of what drove us 5 years ago into setting this up, was to be able to create a space to start the conversation, to keep it going, to for people to be able to have a safe space to go, I say this to myself. Is that, does anybody else do that? Does anybody else say these really cruel things? Because we can be so cruel, can't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've been through that myself. I can think of many, many examples from my own life and career where I was like questioning myself, like, who are you that you get to do this, or whatever the case is. But yeah, it's so common. It's so common. And I love what you said earlier. Like, it is so natural for us to just want to hide that part of us, right? Just not talk about it, not bringing out. And because of the very nature of imposter syndrome, right? It's like the cycle. We don't want to talk about it because we don't want to get found out, but then we kind of isolate with that part of us and just assume that we're the only ones that experience it in that particular way. So I love that about it.
Yeah, that so resonates, because I used to spend most of my life feeling like I was having two simultaneous conversations, one that I hoped stayed in my head and one that I hoped came out. So the one that would come out, I hoped, would be the one that was setting direction and allowing my people to understand what I needed for them. And the one that was in my head was, oh my God, you're hopeless at this. Everybody knows you're hopeless at this. Why don't you just stop pretending? And it was weird to almost constantly, it was like living in sliding doors, but both of them were inside my head at the same time. Have you had any experience of that, or any clients who've had that kind of feeling?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's so much and so many examples I can think of, like from my clients' perspective as well, with this, where they're in this position where they feel like, oh, something's wrong with me. Like, even though yes, other people are acknowledging me or whatever it is, and I see this a lot actually come out of reviews, right? So when they get feedback from people, they're like, they just brush it off, like, oh, oh, okay, well, they're just saying that to be nice. Like it's so difficult for them to take in positive feedback because their minds are playing a completely different, like there's a different script going on, right, in their heads. And because they're questioning and doubting, they have this deep, like seated belief in themselves based on like this imposter syndrome, that it's so hard for them to reflect or to receive any kind of truth, or they're always questioning and doubting because that's just what's going on in their minds. And I've been through this in my career as well. So, and I used to do this a lot with positive feedback. I would always brush it aside and go, oh, they're just being nice, and then move on as if it never happened. Like I never got that. Because in my head, I believe that, oh, I'm not that great. Like that's not, no, they cannot be talking about me. They're just being nice about it. And so that's kind of the dialogue that would go on. And then I would just, like that further entrench that belief that, I'm not that great. Like there's no, like that's not even me. So I would almost like disassociate from the person that they saw me as, and just almost live like in this in my body as if I'm somebody completely different than what the world sees. It's the weirdest thing. And so when I think back to, it's so weird to even say that out loud, right?
Yeah.
It is so true. It's weird, like the way this kind of plays out. And hopefully, as I'm saying that, people can resonate with it. But that's really what was going on in my head. It was so easy for me to just be dismissive of anything positive. Because I'm like,
so that so resonates. So I remember I used to say to myself, if only they knew what I knew. Somebody gave me something positive. I either dismiss it as they were being kind or they were being nice, or I remember winning an award once and convincing myself they'd got a point to prove to somebody else. Completely and utterly convinced it had nothing at all to do with me, and was absolutely because they'd got a point to prove to somebody else, and it wasn't true.
Right.
One of my friends calls it the Primark brush off. When somebody says you look nice, you go, oh, this was like £2 from Primark.
Oh, right.
We can't accept and own that we can't just say thank you when somebody gives you like a compliment, when somebody gives you positive feedback. We can't just go thank you, full stop. We have to come back with a reason why you don't really deserve that praise.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
It's so strange how our minds work like that. I do that I still do that. Like when you gave me that example, I was like, oh yeah, I do that. If somebody compliments, my outfit or whatever, whatever it is, I'm like, it's
like we have to get rid of it almost, isn't it? And I wonder, so I'd love your thoughts on this. I wonder if it is impacted further because of the way we were brought up, where you don't want to appear to be too showy or think too much of yourself, or we've been told ego's a bad thing, and yet actually, if we have absolutely no ego whatsoever, that's a negative as well, isn't it? It's like anything overplayed is a problem. But I think we're kind of so afraid that we might come across as being egotistical that actually we've lost the sense of healthy ego that keeps you safe and that allows you to not feel unworthy in every moment. Would you agree?
So true. Oh, 100%, 100%. I think the other side of that coin with ego is humility, right? So much of us value humility so much that we have this idea in our head of what humility needs to look like or looks like for us. And so anytime that we have something that, that like a compliment or a praise or something, some kind of positive feedback, at least this has been so true for me because I value humility so much, and I love that we're talking about it because it actually gives me a way to vocalize this, because this is just all it helps to unpack this even just for me personally. But because I think I have humility as such a high value, and a lot of my clients do too, they minimize it, right? They're like, no, I have to be humble, so I'm not going to take in this praise because that means, to your point, that I'm feeding my ego and I'm thinking of myself maybe more than I should, or whatever the case may be. And of course they have this deep entrenched focus on how they're being perceived, and I know I did too, especially in the corporate setting, because you're surrounded by people all the time, and there is this perception is so like that, the focus on perception is so strong that that humility comes into play there, where they're like, oh, I want to be seen as that humble person. So now I have to respond in a way that I think that's going to give me a positive perception by the person that's giving me the feedback. So I think that, yeah, but you're absolutely spot on. I think with the ego, they're so afraid of like, oh, I don't want to come across as that egotistical person. So I'm just going to totally downplay and go swing the pendulum in the other direction.
Oh, that definitely resonates. So we do so many odd things. That just remind me of a conversation I had with my mum just this week, where it was around setting boundaries, and the fact that she says yes to everything, and then finds herself sometimes lacking. And I was like, well, let's just chat that through a little bit, Mum. So, and she was like, I don't want people to not like me, and I said, okay. I said, but can I just ask, would you agree that most people, because there's always an exception to every rule, most people want to be liked? And she was like, well, yeah, I can agree to that. I said, okay. And when somebody says no to you because it doesn't work for them, I said, do you dislike them? She went, well, no, of course not. She said, actually, I admire the fact that they're being honest, and that they're not feeling that they've got to do something the other way. And I said, okay, so we agree with the same as everybody else in that we would like to be liked, and so would everybody else. She went, yeah. I said, and we also agreed that the facts tell us that when somebody says no to us, we don't dislike them. We understand that they were just making their point. And she went, yeah, that's right. I said, so they're two factual statements. And she went, yeah. I said, so how does that resonate with this story that you're telling yourself? That actually, if you say no because it doesn't work for you, you're going to be unlikable. What evidence? And she went, I've never thought of that. And I said, well, no. I said, that's because I grew up in that camp with you, Mum. Like, I can't possibly say no. I can't possibly set a boundary. I can't possibly put myself even equal, not first, but even equal to other people. I have to be behind. I have to, probably driven by that, be humble. Don't think too much of yourself. I said that I was so disconnected that actually, I wasn't even in the top 10. I probably wasn't even in the top 100 of things to consider before I made a decision. And actually, that's not fair either. I said, it's not saying you've got to put yourself first. I said, but you have got to place yourself somewhere in the decision making of how you're going to spend your life. I said, if not, you're not in control of it anymore. You're just reacting, aren't you, to what everybody else wants?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's powerful, what you just said. And I love the conversation with your mom and how you unpacked that. That was brilliant. Brilliant.
Thank you.
So much of that resonates with me too. It's just like we have a completely different standard, right, of how we see other people and then how we view ourselves, even in exactly the same type of situation. So it's so good to bring that to light.
It's so true. And yet we convince ourselves that it's evidence-based.
Right.
It's evidence-based. If I do this, I will be disliked. If I dare to say no, I remember once many years ago, going round I used to cut hair, and I went round to cut one of the girls at work. I was now in financial services, but I went round to cut her hair, and they had made my tea. Lovely people had gone out of their way to make my tea, and it was shellfish, and I don't like shellfish, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything because I didn't want to cause offence. So even though I didn't like it, I forced myself to eat it. And then every time I went, they'd find something else, and it would always be shellfish. And I was like, I could have just said, because equally, I acknowledged shellfish is expensive. So they were doing this as a real treat, but I hadn't realised at the time that actually, if I'd have just been a bit more honest and said, I really appreciate everything that you've done, but actually, I'm not a massive shellfish eater, I would have allowed them to provide me with a much more reasonable meal. It wasn't that hadn't entered my head that I was actually doing them a disservice. I was just trying to be really, really polite. And I guess now I'm older, you can look at things and go, but you could have been helping them out if you've been brave enough to say, thank you, but and I'll eat today, but in the future, would you mind if it wasn't shellfish? And I was like, how do we get to a place where we're so hung up on getting it wrong? And if, for me, and I'd love your thoughts on this one. For me, one of the bits that suddenly resonated with me was I was so busy telling myself what everybody else would think, and then using that as a reason to do or to not do something. Well, I best do this because everyone's going to think that, and everyone's going to think the other. And I'm like, that's interesting. You haven't actually had the courtesy of asking them what they think.
Right.
You're telling them what they think. Well, you're not even telling them. They're not in this conversation at all. You're doing it in your head. But you've now decided to write the script for them and then make them accountable for those words. And if you ask them, they very often have a very different view of you and how you show up, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, like, to that point, and I tell my clients this all the time, especially when it comes to like that conversation, right, or getting feedback or something like that. It's like sometimes when people say something to you, especially if it's positive or whatever it is, believe them. Like, right, you know, like, it's a lot of times, like you said, we make up a whole story or a whole script or like the reasoning behind things in our own mind, when even sometimes we do ask the question or whatever it is, and they're telling us, no, this is fine, or this is perfect, this is fine. In our head, we go into that thing of like, oh, they're just saying that. No, you have to believe people, but then you also have to give them the opportunity, right? So if you want to find out something, like in that example, that was such a brilliant example of this. And I think a lot of that can also be tied, kind of going back to the, you know, our belief systems and our patterns and our values and all of that. As you were telling the story, it just made me think of, for myself personally, that value of respect. Like, I have such, and I only realized this very recently, that, and I use that, my language, like, you know, reflects that for me, that was a very, you know, a respectful thing to do in those situations, was to not say anything, just to accept it and, you know, show gratitude. And even if it was very uncomfortable for me to eat the sandwich or whatever, you know, whatever it is, I'm like, that's disrespectful if I say something, because they're going to take that as disrespect. And to your point, the tape kind of plays, right? Like, oh, that's what they're going to think. But we don't even ever give them an opportunity, and actually can have the opposite effect. And I love that you pointed this out, because in doing that, you actually do a disservice to them, because you're putting on them what you think, you know, is they're going to think, or whatever that is. And then, but at the same time, you're not honoring them by giving them the opportunity to serve you well in that situation, right, in that example that you gave. So I love that there's so many different ways to think about it, but that's such a beautiful way to have a different perspective on that situation, to say, no, actually, that can be a really big disservice to the person, because who doesn't want to serve other people well? Who doesn't want to know, okay, how can I best serve you, right? And by holding back, we don't give that person the opportunity to do that. And like, have them, even if you're not sure or you don't know how they're going to take it, ask, right? And then you have to believe them when they tell you, rather than, and kind of resist that story that we tell ourselves, like, oh, they're just being nice, or, oh, this, you know, whatever the case is, because that's our story, and we've got to own it and realize that that's not always true.
Yeah, that so resonates. Yeah, I remember the moment in my life when I realized that actually I was the person that was accountable for all those awful things I'd said to myself, and blamed, not actually blamed, but in my head, if I didn't do this, they're going to think that. Well, actually, those thoughts were my thoughts. They weren't anybody else's. I've not asked anybody else. I've not given them permission to be part of the solution. I've just written the script for myself, and then I cut them in as the actors of that script. And then use that as a reason to not move forward. And you know, that was a hard one. When you think about some of the most difficult, dark times that we've all had, you know, we all have light in our lives if we're lucky, and we all have dark in our lives. And you kind of look at them and go, a lot of that I drove. In fact, almost all of that I drove, because of the script I chose to continue to allow to run, you know, what was going on in my world. And you know, I remember reading somewhere that, you know, we create this kind of script of who we are and what we want to be, by the age of 7, and we enforce it at 14, and we embed it at 21. And unless you go back and look at it, that's the blueprint, that's the operating system that's running who you are. And I was like, you know, I'm 52 this year, so it's like, well, okay, so that would be 31-year-old software
Mhm.
Could you imagine that for a second? Could you imagine having your phone run on 31-year-old software? I don't know about you, but I mean, the minute a software update comes out, I'm like, oh, must do it immediately. The world might implode if I don't immediately update it, get rid of the bugs. And I was like, but you're not doing that with yourself. You're not looking at what you're telling yourself, that operating system in your head.
Absolutely right.
And how many bugs are in there that just need fixing?
Yeah, that's so true. And that's why I love coaching, because it unpacks so much. And even having conversations like this helps, shine a light on things that a lot of times we either hide, like purposefully hide, or just unconsciously don't even think about and don't even touch. But it's running. That operating system is constantly running, and it's influencing everything. It's influencing how we perceive the world and our situations. It's influencing decisions we make. It influences the way we feel, triggers we have. Like all of these things are running under, to your point, that 30-year-old operating system, and we just are either oblivious to it, or there's parts of it that we intentionally just shut off, like, oh no, I don't want to deal with that, so we'll just file that away and keep on moving. Yes, yeah. So, and it's just like, oh my goodness, like at what point? And I love that you're putting a spotlight on this, because it's so helpful to ask the question, like, what is it inside of me that needs to be upgraded, or that needs a different perspective, that needs to be dusted off, and I need to actually shine a light on it, because otherwise it's just holding me back, and it's holding back the gift that I have and the purpose that I have to serve other people. And I think that's another perspective that we don't often think about, that our ability to reflect and grow and develop actually impacts our ability to be more impactful, right, and influential and all that in the world. And the more we hide that and even step into this imposter syndrome and stay there and not address it, or look for ways to how we can really move forward or move past some of these things, we're holding back who we are created to be and our gifts from the world, and from what we were supposed to do and how we're supposed to bless and help others. So I know for me, the whole pivot point there, from this imposter syndrome, to actually really focus more on, okay, what am I here to do, and focus less on myself, because I think sometimes imposter syndrome can also have that other effect where you think too much, right, about, like, internally. There's so much internal dialogue about, oh, how am I being perceived, but what is it about me, and oh, I don't, it's all I right? Versus, no, but what am I actually here to do? How do I focus this on, like, being the very best version of myself, so that I can then go out and serve others? So for me, that pivot point was my identity. And it really comes back to my faith. When I started to believe that there's something much bigger in play here, and God is working through me, but I have to give him the ability to actually do that. And by staying stuck in these places and not working on, allowing him to work through me in some of these things, it pulls back my ability to really be effective in the world. So that for me was the turning point. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, I have to get over myself because it's much bigger at play here, and I've got to get out of my own way in order to be the person that I'm called to be.
I love that. Mine was similar. Once I realised that actually, our purpose is greater than we are, and it reminds me of a Pablo Picasso quote, which I think goes something along the lines of, "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away."
Yes.
And I loved that, which was like, actually, that's what we're here to do, is find what was the gift that you've been granted, and then give that back to the world, and not from a position of, look at me, how great am I, but from a position of, we're here to serve, we're here to help people, to help things improve. And I think I might have shared this with you before, but Scarlett and I did a family mission statement a couple of years ago. So we sat down and we worked through, okay, what is it that we would like to live our lives by? What is it we would like to do together? And we came up with that we want to live a life of passionate curiosity, and to pass our thoughts, words, and deeds through the lenses of, is it kind, is it honest, and does it add value? And so that's what we do. We go, how curious are we being today? How open are we to be wrong? That there's a different way, that there's something else. And then before we're about to do or say this, is it kind? Is it honest? And does it add value? How would we feel if somebody did or said that to us? And I guess it helped to really start to live more intentionally, because you were taking only a couple of seconds, but you were taking a couple of seconds to just filter that thinking, which for me helped me catch sometimes when that inner critic was like taking the reins, and it was like, no, thank you.
Right.
Because as you know, and I guess having Scarlett really helped me with this, because children don't learn by what we say and what we do. They learn by how we are and who we are. And so I realized that it's okay me saying one thing to her, but if she sees me living a different life, then that's going to be what she learns. And so I looked at it and went, right, so that kind, honest and add value has to also be what you're telling yourself, not just what you're doing elsewhere, because you've got to, as Gandhi said, you've got to be the change you want to see.
Right.
So you've got to step into that. And uncomfortable as it was, actually, it really helped to start to see a different perspective.
That is so good. I love that. What a beautiful example and opportunity that our kids give us to do that. And I just love your intentionality as a mom to even do like a mission statement and to ask these questions and to explore that with her, because you're absolutely leading by example and teaching her how to do this and how to do it well. And so, yeah, I just love that. And that was actually another turning point for me, was thinking about it through that lens of, and this is how I used to think about it when I was, anytime I walked into work, I would think about, okay, if my daughter was standing next to me all day long and just standing next to me and following me around, how would I react or respond or engage with other people? How would I show up in the world if I knew she was watching my every move? Because to your point, like for me as well as a mom, it was so important to lead by example and to, like really model for her what it looked like to have that, those beliefs and the things that are really important. And so that helped me so much. It helped me like just be confident in who God made me, so that when I stepped into the workplace, I was like, okay, well, how do I approach this conversation in a way that if my daughter was standing right next to me, I would feel really good walking away thinking, I did the best that I could and I represented who I am and what I believe really, really well. So I love that. That's such a beautiful example, and what a great role model you are for Scarlett too. I love it.
And likewise, I know you're an amazing mum and an amazing role model for your children. And I think it's because you're doing it with intentionality. I mean, it comes from a position of love, doesn't it? It comes from a position of, with our children, you'd love to take the pain away. You'd love for them never to feel any harm or any hurt. But that's not realistic. That's not going to happen. And so I guess you step in instead and go, hey, how can I give them the tools, the resources, the strategies that they can use for themselves, and hopefully create the script in their head that doesn't mean they have to get into their 40s like I was and unlearn it and try and come up with something else. And I read the other day that there was a study, and there was two groups of people, and the first group of people were praised for their achievement. So they were praised for when they were successful. And the second group of people were praised for trying. So it wasn't for succeeding, it was for trying. And over time, the group that had been praised on trying outperformed significantly the group that had been praised for success. Because actually the muscle, the value that you wanted people to repeat was, it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. Perfection's not the goal here. Progress is the goal. And so actually it's so now with Scarlett, I'll be really clear with it. Even when she's won something, I'm like, what I'm most proud of? I'm most proud that no matter what happens, you get up and you try again, and you always try your best. And it's because you do that this is where you've got to. But I think it's changing some of that script, isn't it, on how we recognize success to enable us to be freer of our own internal control.
That's so good. That is so good. And the other thing that comes to me as you were talking about that is we get to reflect and actually see people at a deeper level if we choose to, and reflect that back to them. That is such a beautiful gift, right? So like that example that you gave with Scarlett, and how you praised her and you like really encouraged her for trying and giving it her all. We also get to see people and call out their values and the things that stand out, who make the things that make them so special and unique and all of that in them. And at the same time, we have to be very conscious of doing that for ourselves too, because that's like walking the talk too, right? If you're doing that in others and you want them to receive it, well, you have to be able to receive it for yourself from others, but also from yourself, right? You need to be able to say those things and see yourself through that lens of, wow, you look at how you're made. Like there's just so many incredible qualities about you that that contribute to these things that you're seeing in the external world. But I'm going to focus on the fact we're celebrating who you are, because who you are has contributed to all of these other things around you. So I think that's such a beautiful gift that we get to give others, but it's also our responsibility to be able to reflect on that for ourselves, so that we can then rise up and and be that light in the world that we're called to be.
Oh, Sharissa, I love that. I can't believe we're out of time. It always just flies. It feels like 5 minutes whenever I
yes. Oh my goodness.
Thank you so very much for coming along and sharing your insight with us today. I love that whole element of taking accountability, of being it for ourselves as much as we're going to be it for other people, and being willing to receive the feedback. And I would just like to tell you how much I appreciate you and how grateful I am that we connected, that we now get to remain friends, and that I get to share in your journey and learn alongside you. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Kim. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor. And honestly, anytime I have an opportunity to connect with you, I'm thrilled, beyond excited. So I'm so grateful that our paths crossed. And thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. It is phenomenal, and obviously helping so many people. So I'm just grateful to be a small part of that. Thank you.